The ceiling lamps hummed softly in the spotless corridors of Hope Children's Hospital as 32-year-old janitor Ethan Carter pushed his cart through the pediatric ward. His simple navy t-shirt and durable jeans were practical, not fashionable, and his hands bore rough calluses from years of honest toil. What set Ethan apart from other janitorial staff was his genuine warmth toward the young patients he encountered on his daily rounds through the bustling hospital environment. Ethan had been employed at Hope for 3 years, taking the job after his military service ended, needing steady income to support himself while pursuing child psychology studies in evening classes. His co-workers regarded him as someone who always found time to offer a comforting smile to a scared child or assist a worried parent navigating the hospital's complex maze of hallways with kindness and patience. That Tuesday morning, Ethan was repairing ceiling fixtures in the speech therapy wing when he heard raised voices echoing from a nearby treatment room. Through the slightly open door, he saw a man in an expensive suit arguing with a woman in professional attire, likely a therapist. "This situation is unacceptable," the man said, his voice tight with frustration and deep desperation, reflecting a father's anguish. 8 months had passed since the accident, and Lily hadn't spoken a single word. "I've hired the finest specialists money can buy, yet nothing has worked." Ethan recognized the raw pain in the man's voice, even through his anger. This wasn't corporate frustration, it was a father's heartbreak watching his child suffer. In silence, "Mr. Thompson, I understand your concerns," the therapist replied with calm professionalism. "Selective mutism following trauma is complex. Lily hasn't lost her physical ability to speak. She's lost the emotional safety to do so, which requires time and a tailored approach." "Time?" The man's voice cracked with emotion. "How much more time? She used to be so lively, so full of chatter. Now she sits in silence, and I feel I'm losing her more each day." Ethan glanced into the room, seeing a small girl, perhaps 4 years old, seated on a tiny chair. Her curly blonde hair framed a delicate white and pink dress, but her posture seemed far older than her years, heavy with unspoken burdens. She stared straight ahead with a vacant expression, like a child who had retreated deep within herself for protection from a frightening world. The therapist presented Lily with various toys and communication cards, attempting to engage her in any form of interaction, but the girl remained utterly unresponsive, locked in her silent world. "Lily, darling," the man said, kneeling beside her chair with a voice full of love. "Daddy's right here. Can you look at me? Can you say anything at all?" Lily didn't acknowledge her father, continuing to stare as if existing in a separate realm, detached from those around her. Ethan's heart ached for both father and daughter, a pain that stirred memories of his studies. He recognized signs of post-traumatic stress in children, learned from his psychology courses and witnessed during his military service. More importantly, he understood that sometimes the most professional approaches weren't what a traumatized child needed most to heal. As the session ended without progress, Ethan watched the man gently carry his daughter out of the therapy room. Lily's arms hung limply at her sides, showing no reaction to being moved or held, as if she were a fragile doll. "Pardon me," Ethan said, approaching the man in the corridor with quiet respect. "I couldn't help but overhear." "I'm Ethan Carter, and I work here at the hospital." The man looked at Ethan with a weary expression, worn down by countless pieces of unsolicited advice. "I'm Robert Thompson, and this is my daughter, Lily," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Mr. Thompson, I know this may seem forward, but I have experience with children who've faced trauma. Would you allow me to try a different approach with Lily?" Robert studied Ethan with a mix of desperate hope and cautious skepticism, unsure of this stranger's intentions. "You're a janitor," he said. "No offense, But I've already spent hundreds of thousands on top child psychologists and speech therapists across the country. I understand your doubts, Ethan replied gently, his voice steady and sincere. But sometimes children respond to people who aren't trying to fix or change them. Sometimes they just need someone willing to share their world without demanding anything in return. What exactly are you suggesting? Robert asked, his tone softening slightly. Just let me spend time with Lily during my breaks. Not in therapy, not treatment, just two people sharing the same space. No pressure, no expectations, only letting her know she's safe and cared for. Robert looked down at his daughter, who showed no awareness of the conversation unfolding around her. What qualifications do you have to work with children? He asked, seeking reassurance. I'm studying child psychology and have experience with trauma from my military service. But more than that, I know what it feels like to retreat into silence when the world becomes too overwhelming. Something in Ethan's calm, empathetic voice seemed to resonate with Robert, and he agreed to let Ethan spend time with Lily during her regular hospital visits, hoping for a miracle. Over the following weeks, Ethan sat with Lily in the hospital's garden courtyard during his lunch. Breaks, surrounded by blooming flowers and soft sunlight. He never tried to force her to speak or respond, choosing instead to simply be present in her world. Sometimes he read aloud from children's books, sometimes hummed gentle melodies, and sometimes sat quietly, listening to birds chirping in nearby trees, creating a peaceful atmosphere. "You know, Lily," Ethan said one afternoon as they sat on a bench amidst vibrant blossoms, "I once knew a little girl who loved butterflies. She'd spend hours watching them flutter from flower to flower, saying they were like dancing rainbows in the sky." Lily showed no outward reaction, but Ethan noticed her breathing become more relaxed, her posture less rigid, as if she was slowly unwinding. "The thing about butterflies," he continued softly, "is that they start as caterpillars, wrapping themselves tightly in a cocoon when the world feels too scary. They stay hidden until they feel safe enough to emerge and show their beautiful wings." Week after week, Ethan continued these gentle sessions, never pushing Lily to respond or participate, offering only a consistent, safe presence while sharing stories, songs, and observations about the world around them. Robert began staying to watch these interactions, initially skeptical but gradually amazed by the subtle changes he saw in his daughter. Lily's posture became more natural, her breathing more even, and occasionally Ethan caught her glancing. At the birds or flowers, he pointed out, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Ethan," Robert said one evening as they walked to the parking garage, his voice filled with wonder, "I have to ask you something. Why are you doing this? You spend your lunch breaks and free time with a child who doesn't even acknowledge you. What do you get out of it?" Ethan paused, considering how to explain something that felt so natural to him. "Mr. Thompson, I get the privilege of spending time with a remarkable little girl who's working so hard to feel safe in a world that hurt her deeply. Even if she never speaks again, she deserves to know there are people who value her exactly as she is." "But surely you hope she'll speak again?" Robert pressed, searching Ethan's face. "Of course I hope for that," Ethan replied warmly. "But my hope doesn't depend on her performing or achieving anything. My hope is simply that she feels loved, safe, and knows she has choices about how and when she engages with the world around her." It was during the 6th week of their daily sessions that a breakthrough happened. Ethan was reading aloud from a book about a lost puppy when Lily suddenly stood up from the bench and walked over to where a small bird had landed near the fountain. "Birdie," she whispered so quietly that Ethan almost thought he'd imagined it. But the word hung in the air between them, the first sound Lily had made in 8 months. Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he kept his voice calm and natural to avoid startling her. "Yes, Lily, that's a little brown bird," he said gently. "He looks like he's taking a drink of water. Thirsty birdie." Lily said, her voice still barely audible but clearly intentional, a small spark of connection to the world. From that day forward, Lily began to emerge from her silence. Gradually and naturally, starting with single words, then short phrases, always in response to something in her immediate environment, rather than direct questions or prompts. The professional speech therapists were astonished by Lily's progress, marveling at her transformation. But Ethan understood that the breakthrough hadn't come from any technique or method. It had come from Lily feeling safe enough to risk communication again, to let her voice be heard. "Ethan," Robert said one afternoon, as they watched Lily chase bubbles in the garden, laughing and calling out to each floating sphere with newfound joy, "you've given me my daughter back. I meant what I said before. If you could teach her to speak again, I'd give you everything. What can I do to repay you?" Ethan smiled, watching Lily's delight as she rediscovered her voice, her eyes bright with life. "Mr. Thompson, you don't owe me anything," he said sincerely. "But if you want to do something meaningful, consider funding a program here at the hospital that provides trauma-informed care for children. Not just traditional therapy, but supportive relationships with people who understand that healing happens in many different ways." "You mean hiring more people like you?" Robert asked, his voice filled with gratitude. "I mean creating opportunities for children to connect with caring adults who focus on loving them while they heal at their own pace without pressure." 6 months later, Ethan stood in the newly opened Thompson Family Healing Center within Hope Children's Hospital, a beacon of hope for families. The program he had helped design provided comprehensive support for children and families dealing with trauma, combining traditional therapy with innovative approaches that emphasized relationship building and emotional safety. Lily, now 5 years old and chattering constantly about everything from butterflies to her favorite books, had become the unofficial mascot of the center. Her bright smile, a symbol of recovery. Her journey inspired other traumatized children and showed their families that healing was possible, even after the darkest times. "Mr. Ethan," Lily said, tugging on his sleeve as he prepared to begin his shift, her voice full of excitement, "will you read me the butterfly story today?" "Of course, Lily," Ethan replied with a grin. "But first, do you want to help me water the flowers in our garden?" "Yes," she exclaimed, bouncing with enthusiasm. "And I want to tell them about the butterflies that are sleeping in their cocoons, waiting to feel safe enough to fly." As Ethan and Lily walked hand in hand toward the garden, their laughter echoing softly, Robert watched from his office window, his heart full. The janitor, who had asked for nothing but the chance to sit quietly with a traumatized child, had given his family something all his wealth could never have purchased: the understanding that love and patience could heal wounds that medicine and technology alone could not touch. The worker, who had succeeded where specialists had struggled, had taught them all that sometimes the most profound healing happens not through complex interventions, but through the simple act of providing an unconditional presence to someone who needs to know they are valued exactly as they are. And the little girl, who had wrapped herself in silence like a protective cocoon, had learned that when the world feels safe again, the most beautiful thing you can do is spread your wings and let your voice soar into the sky.